Hey, I'm Dr. Mike Varshovsky, board-certified family medicine physician. Welcome to a new episode of Truth or Scare, where we break down viral medical claims so you don't have to. This week's claim, taking Benadryl is not healthy for your brain and it causes dementia. The medication Benadryl is simply a brand name. The active ingredient in it is called diphenhydramine. It's an antihistamine, meaning it's used to treat allergic reactions. And more specifically, it's a first-generation antihistamine. So think of it as a PlayStation 1 when PlayStation 2 and 3 are already out. I only point out that it's first generation because we didn't get to work out all the kinks, as it has some notable side effects, specifically drowsiness. And because the drowsiness side effect is so significant, companies actually started capitalizing on it by marketing it as a sleep aid. These are all products that make use of the same ingredient, diphenhydramine, but for the drowsy side effect as opposed to its true use as an antihistamine. With newer antihistamines on the market, especially ones that are non-drowsy, I find it strange that so many people still use Benadryl for allergic reactions. Not only is the chance of drowsiness quite high, but that sedating effect can last for longer than just one day. In fact, the FAA doesn't even allow pilots to fly after taking Benadryl for at least 60 hours because of the enormous research showing its lasting impact on the brain. The main reason this happens is because the drug crosses something known as the blood-brain barrier. This is a barrier that's like a protective shield around your brain. It's made of tightly packed cells that only allow essential nutrients and oxygen to pass through while blocking harmful substances like toxins and bacteria. The newer antihistamines like fexofenadine basically don't cross the barrier, and as a result, you have much less, if any, brain interference. Now, let's get to the second component of the claim, dementia. Dementia is a general term for impairment in cognition, trouble thinking clearly, remembering things, or making decisions. It's when your brain doesn't work as well as it normally does, making it harder to focus, understand things, and even communicate. Alzheimer's disease is probably the most well-known form of dementia, and despite the many social media posts I've seen lately covering this Benadryl trend, it really took off in 2015 thanks to this big study. In fact, this study wasn't only about Benadryl. It looked at a class of drugs called anticholinergics, which Benadryl is a part of. These drugs all block the action of the same neurotransmitter, ACH, and they vary in their purpose. Antihistamines, antidepressants, drugs for Parkinson's, GI and bladder problems all fall under this umbrella. The study included people 65 and older who'd been taking one or more of these drugs for 10 years, and it found those who've taken the highest amount of them were significantly more likely to develop dementia. Other studies have supported this link too. However, it's really important here to note that they've all been observational studies, which means they don't definitively tell us if the drugs actually cause dementia. Proof of causation would need to come from a proper clinical trial. But a clinical trial would require giving medications to a random group of people who wouldn't know they're taking them. And since these drugs are suspected to cause dementia, it wouldn't really be ethical to force people to take them. Also, some anticholinergics are known to have short-term cognitive side effects like disorientation because of how they act on the nervous system, specifically the central nervous system, the brain. And having low levels of the ACH neurotransmitter that's blocked by anticholinergics has been linked to Alzheimer's. Because the research we have is correlational, not causational, we do have to admit that it's possible the drugs might not be responsible for the dementia. Perhaps the increased dementia risk has to do with how insomnia, not the medication itself, impacted the brain. Another possibility indicated by at least one study is that anticholinergics amplify cognitive problems in people who are already in the earliest stages of dementia. So rather than causing someone to get dementia, the medications might cause the symptoms to show more obviously. Or maybe anticholinergic use does explain dementia cases, but only when it's combined with other factors like advanced age or multiple medications. Oh, and we can't forget, most studies on this topic have looked at older people. So researchers don't yet know if frequent use of these drugs when you're younger comes with the risk of dementia when you're older. What does seem to matter is how frequently you take these drugs, for how long, and how many you take. Research actually suggests dementia risk is cumulative, meaning it can add up with multiple drugs or over time. So reducing overall exposure is probably beneficial. Considering all these potential risks, the American Academy of Family Physicians, the organization that guides me, actually advises us to weigh other treatment options conditions before starting highly anticholinergic medications, specifically to older patients. There's clearly a lot to learn about what role these anticholinergics play in the development of dementia. So what's the big takeaway here? First of all, we need better research, and one way we could accomplish that without crossing ethical boundaries is to check cognitive abilities in people who've chosen to take the drugs and compare them to people who haven't. But we also need not fearmonger here. For an average healthy adult, taking Benadryl on rare occasions does not seem to randomly spur on dementia. But while we don't have enough evidence to prove causation, the fact that it's shown up in a lot of research as a potential risk means it's probably best to take some caution here. And remember, there are better options for allergies. Loratadine lasts longer and is non-drowsy. Fexofenadine has 0% brain interference and isn't considered an anticholinergic. And while it's tempting to reach for Benadryl every time an insomnia bout hits, I'd warn some caution. To be perfectly honest, before knowing all this, on rare occasions, I've actually taken Benadryl as a sleep aid and felt the sedating effects even the next day. I actually did it before my boxing match with Chris Avila, and boy, do I regret that. In all seriousness, if you or a loved one is reaching for Benadryl on a regular basis for sleep, talk to a doctor about getting to the source of the problem instead of just masking it. We definitely want you to be able to get good quality sleep. We just want it to happen safely. And if you're taking Benadryl consistently for your allergies, talk to your doctor about other potential options that could work for you with potentially less side effects. On my truth or scare scale, where 0 is total BS and 10 is an absolute truth, this claim gets a 6. Because while it's presented without enough context, exaggerates a bit, and glosses over the lack of causal evidence, the crux of it is fairly true. Speaking of the medical system causing harm, click here to see unbelievable things that doctors used to really recommend. What a watch. And as always, stay happy and healthy.